afternoon. I'm Ralph Albert Thomas, CEO and Executive Director of the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to IssuesWatch Live. The process of becoming a certified public accountant is a rigorous one, and for good reason. CPAs are trusted professionals for the businesses they work for and the clients they serve. But with rapid changes in the business world, new skills and competencies are being sought by those hiring CPAs. That's where the CPA Evolution Initiative comes in. It's a joint effort of the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, also known as NASBA, and the American Institute of CPAs, also known as the AICPA. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by two people who, if they don't know everything, nobody else does, but two people who know everything there is to know about the CPA Evolution Initiative. Colleen Conrad is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at NASBA, and overseeing all operations, including the CPA exam activities. Welcome, Colleen.
Thanks, Ralph.
We also have Julia Woislaw, who is the lead manager for CPA Evolution at the AICPA. Welcome, Julia.
Thanks, Ralph.
Now, before I turn things over to both of you, I want to remind our viewers that they can enter questions in the comments field during the presentation. And we'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll try to field as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Okay, Julia and Conrad, please take it away.
All right, thanks, Ralph, and thank you all for tuning in today. We're excited to get to talk to you about CPA Evolution. So I'm going to kick us off with a little bit of background and introduction, and then turn it over to Colleen to talk about how we got to where we are today. So as we all know, there's a lot of technology that is impacting the CPA profession. There's a lot of new innovations that are creating new marketplace demands. And those innovations are creating these new opportunities for CPAs, both in terms of the types of services CPAs perform and in how those services are delivered. And as a profession, CPAs should be embracing and leveraging those technologies as they emerge. And we've also seen some significant changes in CPA firm hiring, which I'll get to in a minute. So I mentioned that emerging tech is changing how CPAs practice. And just to give you a few examples of changes we've seen recently, there are now tools that can process confirmations for you, tools that can read contracts for you. We've seen big changes in audit data analytics. I think data analytics and machine learning are two that are really disrupting the CPA profession. And so these are just some examples of the ways technology is changing how CPAs practice. And all of these emerging technologies are creating these new marketplace demands and opportunities for the CPA profession. So you can see here on the screen, these are some examples of those marketplace demands that we're seeing now. And this means that CPAs really need new skills to continue to serve organizations and the public. And those demands for new skills are really reflected in CPA firm hiring trends. So the data on this slide and the next slide are from the AICPA Trends report. So we've seen hiring of accounting graduates slow over the years. And in 2018, we saw that firm hiring of accounting graduates was down 29% since 2014. However, I think the important part of these numbers is to remember that overall firm hiring has actually stayed relatively flat. So firms are hiring about the same number of people, but they're hiring fewer accounting graduates. And they're hiring more non-accounting grads for professional positions. The Trends report also shows that the accounting profession requires new skill sets because of the rapid advancement of emerging technologies, especially in data science and analytics. This is really changing how CPAs do who CPAs do business with and how they do it. And as a result, non-accounting graduates are making up 31% of new graduate hires in public accounting. That's an increase from 20% in 2016. So we need to ensure that accounting graduates and CPAs continue to have the competencies needed to support an accounting profession that plays a really critical role in protecting the public interest. So to talk about how we are looking at that and how we got to where we are today, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen. Oh, you're on mute, Colleen.
There we go. Thank you, Julia. So all of this led to what we call CPA Evolution, and hopefully you've already heard something about it, but we want to kind of take you down our path of where we've been and where we're going over the rest of our time here together. It is a joint, as Julia said, it's a joint evolution between NASBA and AICPA. And the whole goal is to modernize the profession and make sure it stays relevant and that it is focused on what the public needs of CPAs. So where have we been? This is a project we've been looking at for 2.5 years or so. We started back in early 2018, starting to discuss the need for such an initiative to modernize the licensure model, but also look at possibilities of how we might put a model together. So we first circulated an initial concept and received a lot of input on that. We were at that point looking at maybe 2 paths to CPA, one technology focused and the other traditional. And we heard, no, that's not right, that we listened to the stakeholders. So we went back to the drawing board, formed a working group, obtained additional perspective from across the profession, across the working group and leadership of NASBA and AICPA. From that, we drafted some guiding principles, and you could have heard about those late last spring and into the summer. We put those out for public comments, asked for people to say, are these the principles that we need to consider as we develop what the model would look like? So we exposed those principles, received feedback, and then late last summer took all of that feedback and used it to inform the development of the model that we then took back to leadership of NASBA and AICPA and have shared publicly. And actually, last spring in May at Council, we received a vote of Council supporting moving forward with this model. And just a week and a half ago, so this is really brand new news, NASBA's Board of Directors had a vote too and unanimously voted to support moving forward with this model. So we are at the cusp of some exciting change for this profession. We are shifting from a mode of getting feedback and moving into an implementation mode. So it's not proposed anymore, it's actually let's implement this. So what did we do during that period of that continuum of time that I just went over? We received feedback from an unprecedented over 3,000 stakeholders. We're really proud that the profession and those around the profession, the stakeholders, took the time, looked at what we were putting out, and shared their feedback. And I don't want to say that we're done hearing feedback. There is a website that will be referenced later on too, evolutionofcpa.org. There's an email address that Ralph will probably share with you later, that you can continue to send input and feedback as we work through the implementation process. So who did we hear from? Who were the stakeholders? You're going to see some of those populating on this screen. Definitely AICPA's council and the boards of accountancy, but even more importantly, the state CPA societies, the boots on the ground, those out working with the firms, working with CPAs. You know, what do they want to see happen with the profession? We talked to lots of firms. There were focus groups of young CPAs, and I say more newly licensed CPAs. We talked to academia, small universities, big universities. A lot of the volunteer committees of both NASBA, AICPA, and some of the state societies too, including students, as I said, technology committees, some that are focused on business and industry, because we all know that CPAs just aren't in public accounting. CPAs are out there across the business world. And we also chatted with federal regulators, SEC, PCAOB, IRS, Department of Labor, and on, to get their input. So it's been a very rich feedback that has been received. And what did we hear? What did we hear from all this feedback? We definitely heard a support for change. We can't rest on laurels of the profession, that we do need to change. The question was, how do we change? We also heard definitely a support for more of an emphasis on technology. But we did also hear it's not all about technology. It's all about what is core to this profession. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. We heard that it needs to be a model that will position the CPA license and the profession for the future, and that we make sure that we have the right skills in the profession. You know, you saw Julia talk about CPA firms hiring a lot of non-CPAs. Well, that tells me that maybe we didn't have all of the right skill sets in the profession, and maybe we needed to look to what additional skills CPAs need to have. Have they changed over time? And lastly, but very important to me, representing the association of all of the CPA licensing boards around the country, it's, you know, CPA, Certified Public Accountant, we're all about protecting the public interest and being there for the public. The public relies on licensed CPAs to do the right thing, to do it well, and to be in areas of business and helping them with their individual financial matters too. So protecting the public was huge. We also heard to focus on, as I said, a core. It's not about just technology. The core, when you think of a CPA, what is the bedrock of this profession? It's accounting, it's auditing, it's tax, and increasingly more and more it's technology. It's hard to audit without technology. It's hard to do tax work without technology. And then there's more that the profession, all of the attestation services. Think about the public and their reliance on, you know, do they go to a CPA when it comes to cybersecurity issues and other internal controls and controls around technology? It's increasingly important. We heard that we need an education that aligns with the core. To be a licensed CPA, we call it the 3 E's. You have to have education, the right education, you have to pass the CPA examination, you have to have experience. Some would say there's a 4th E because the ethics related to the profession are important too. And we heard that experience requirements need to support audit quality. I will say that is not the focus of this initiative. There are some parallel projects going on related to experience, but we focused on a newly licensed CPA. What do they need? What education and examination do they need to be licensed? And we also heard, hey, it's not just about those newly licensed CPAs, and again, not ending up being part of this specific project, but there's definitely an understanding and a realization that existing CPAs may need to be reskilled. We need to promote emerging services. And I know that the state societies and the AICPA are there for you to help you get there as existing CPAs too. So we heard all of this, and that we needed to, what we absolutely heard was it needs to be more than just about technology, and we have to think differently to keep the profession relevant and doing what it needs to do to protect the public. So we also started to take a look at, we took all of this feedback and we looked at other things too. And we said, well, the body of knowledge that a newly licensed CPA needs to know is growing. And this is not a surprise to any of you, those of you especially that have been around a while. Compared to 1980, the number of, you can see on the screen there, the number of increase, the exponential increase in accounting, auditing, and the Internal Revenue Code, how much it's grown is crazy. Auditing standards, back in 1980, we were at SAS 27. We're up to SAS 137. Accounting standards, we were at FAS 34. Now we're at 168. And the Internal Revenue Code, I don't have a real recent number, but 1980, we're at about 26,000 pages to the Internal Revenue Code, and we're up to over 75,000 pages as of five or 6 years ago. So we know that it's even more than that. So the body of knowledge has continued to grow. And how do you test all of that? How do you say a CPA needs to know all of that? We also know that CPA firms have been telling us that procedures that the newly licensed CPA used to perform aren't so much anymore, right? Maybe you were putting together financial statements or footing things and doing lots of manual checking of invoices and information. So a lot of those procedures and a lot of the tasks that a newly licensed CPA used to do have been automated for sure. They've been offshored and they're performed by paraprofessionals. So that tells us that a newly licensed CPA coming out of school, taking the examination, what they need to know has changed over time. And what they need to know more earlier. They're being asked to think more critically, to use more judgment and skepticism earlier in their career, to problem solve, to really understand things. They're not doing just basic tasks. They're having to roll up their sleeves and dig in and operate at a higher level. They may be reviewing other people's work, and so working more directly with the client. So the demands of the practice require deeper skill sets. So we hear this increasing skills and increasing knowledge, but the exams has stayed the same size. So we realized that we need a different solution now. So what models did we consider? We took all of this information and we said, you know, what can we do to address this challenge? And we evaluated the feedback received, understood that information, and then we thought, okay, well, one way you could do this is you could stretch the examination and education to cover more material, but maybe at less depth, where you know a lot about, you know a little about a lot. And we frankly, we rejected that concept because we saw that it would water down the requirements for licensure. You might get one or two questions on something that maybe the expectation is that a CPA would be deeper in. The candidates may not be deep enough in knowledge and things that matter most. So we didn't feel that that was appropriate. And you may only have, you know, one 30-minute class session on a topic that is important. So we rejected that concept of a model. We also looked at the concept of, okay, well, there's more to know, so let's increase the length of the examination. Let's add sections. Let's add curriculum hours. And we decided that that really was not sustainable as an approach because we know it's just going to continue to snowball. And it also, very importantly, we think increased barriers to entry. The cost of education, the cost to take the examination, and it could have some very serious ramifications to pipeline at a time when we know that it's important to keep good, strong folks coming into the pipeline. So we rejected that model also. So what else did we do? We looked at some other models. We looked at other professions, but we also considered a concept of what if you said CPA-audit, that you are only going to be an auditor or you're only going to be a tax person. Maybe that would be a way to go. Our concern with that was that we don't want this profession splintered, which that could impact that and lead to that. So we rejected. We said CPA needs to be CPA. If you're a CPA, that should be it. You may have some specialties, which right now, that's the way the world works, right? You might be an auditor or a tax person, or you might work in a specific area, but you're still a CPA. And we thought that was important. We also looked at a two-tier concept. This would be that you come in and you're a CPA, but then maybe you have to take additional tests then to be an auditor. And frankly, that's common in other parts of the world, that maybe you are a chartered accountant as a base level designation, but then you become a fellow or you have a specific designation to do audit. We also didn't like that because we didn't like the thought of this being a two class, like a second class of CPA. Again, CPA equals CPA, so we decided to reject that too. We looked at other professions, the medical profession, the legal profession, and others. How did their models work? Well, the medical profession, as we all know, is very rigorous and takes an extended period of time. We also know it's a matter of life and death in many cases and understand the need for that. But we thought for the CPA profession, again, barriers to entry, the length of time it would take to get licensed, we thought wasn't warranted. Legal profession the same way. They have law school where we rely on the normal education system. And so we felt that the barriers to entry there were also not appropriate. So then lastly, we looked at the engineering model. And there were some things there that we thought, this is interesting. There are some things about the engineering model that we decided we wanted to pick up on. We didn't want to just say, yes, follow that model. Some parts of it we didn't want to, but what they do is you take your education and then you take some entry-level examinations. Now, what's different for them than where we ended up is then you wait 4 or 5 years and then go back and take a professional engineer examination. But at that point, and you can take different professional engineer examinations, chemistry or mechanical or whatever. But when you're done, you're still a professional engineer. You're not a PE-chemical or civil. You're just a professional engineer. And we liked that concept, though other parts of it we said, we want to do it a little bit differently. So where did we land? We landed with the model that, again, this is a model that we shared. We vetted with our stakeholders, with the AICPA stakeholders. We put out articles. We've received additional input on it as we've gone. But what this model is a strong core of accounting, audit, tax, and technology, and then a selection of a discipline in which to be further tested and possibly in which you could get further education. So the disciplines that we selected were business reporting and analysis, which would include a lot of the data analytics, tax compliance and planning, so probably no surprise there in either one of those. And then thirdly, information systems and controls. So this, I'm getting a note that you can't hear me. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, fine. I don't know why I'm getting that, but all right. So there are the 3 disciplines. We said the core, everybody has to have. Everybody needs education and examination in those core areas. But then in the disciplines, you can choose a discipline in which to be tested, and Julia will talk about that a little bit more. But you could also get possibly, center your education in those disciplines. Now, why did we go this direction? We said, well, this is a strong core that we heard absolutely was important to our stakeholders. It's a chance to show deeper knowledge in a primary discipline, so more competency, show some depth in an area that might be of interest to you. We think it really does reflect the reality of practice. This is what happens now. But we also know that it needs to be flexible. So I may come out and start in the audit practice of a firm, but then morph into a different discipline later in my career. And this model allows that to happen. It also allows us that if the disciplines need to update over time, it gives us the flexibility to add disciplines, change disciplines if we feel that it's necessary. Most importantly, what we heard is 1 CPA license, and all of this leads to just 1 license. And lastly, again, it enhances public protection by ensuring that everybody has the same core, but allowing people to be deeper, that deeper knowledge that we think helps protect the public. So what I'm going to do now is turn it back over to Julia, and you probably have some questions, and I know that we've heard questions as we've gone along and tried to address them. I think Julia's going to talk about some of that for us.
All right, thanks, Colleen. So we did get a lot of questions throughout this process, and I would say those questions mainly fell into 4 areas. People wanted to know how this would affect CPA candidates, how it would affect accounting students. They wanted to know the impact on accounting education and accounting educators and academia, what this actually means for the exam, for the structure and implementation of the exam, and then as the CPA is a state license, what this means for state laws and rules. So first we looked at how this model would be received by students. And I would say the most common question I hear is, are candidates ready to select a discipline? So to find out where students are doing that right now in their careers and how they would feel about doing that in the future, we conducted a survey of over 600 students and recent graduates. And we reached out to them in a variety of ways, through AICPA and NASBA, through state CPA societies, through business schools, to try and get a wide range of responses. And through discussion groups with students, we had heard that students are already deciding to focus on areas like audit, tax, or advisory, or other areas by the end of their junior year. And the survey we conducted really backed this up. So of the over 300 accounting majors who responded, 67% had already selected a focus area, either through a learning track at their university or by accepting an internship or full-time job offer. Another 23% had not yet selected a focus area, but told us that they would feel comfortable doing so. And only 10% indicated they were not comfortable selecting an area on which to focus. So overall, 90% of students are telling us they would feel comfortable selecting a discipline. We also asked students about how CPA evolution would impact their interest in pursuing the CPA license. And what we heard was really promising. So we had 47% of students say that the evolution licensure model would increase their interest in becoming a CPA. We had 33% tell us they were already very interested in being a CPA and the new model would do nothing to dissuade them. And then we had 4% tell us they were already not interested in pursuing CPA licensure and the new model did not make them more interested. And then we had 16% tell us that they would be less interested under the new model. We asked that less interested group to explain their thinking, to tell us why it made them less interested. And the responses really just indicated a lack of understanding about what was being proposed. So for example, some respondents told us that they thought they would only be acquiring and demonstrating competence in their chosen discipline. So really this just shows that we have an opportunity to do some more education with accounting candidates. And overall, these results point to strong support from the pipeline for a move towards the evolution model. We saw a similar result when we looked at the interest of the non-accounting majors. So 50% told us that evolution would increase their interest in CPA, with only 11% indicating their interest would decrease. We also broke this down further to students that are majoring in subjects like information systems or data analytics. And the results were similar, with 55% of those students saying evolution would increase their interest in CPA and only 14% saying their interest would decrease. So this is an indication that the model would help us keep a strong and healthy pipeline, but more importantly, that it will produce CPAs with those competencies that we need to meet the needs of the market. Another question we heard is asking whether a candidate would be pigeonholed into their chosen discipline. So a key tenet of evolution is that candidates would not be limited to working in their chosen discipline. Everyone becomes a fully licensed CPA under the model, capable of moving to new practice areas, just like CPAs do today. But some of the people we talked to were worried that there would be a de facto limitation on CPAs' ability to practice in new areas because of the discipline they passed. So we reached out to the hiring managers of firms with 50 or more personnel, and that included talent acquisition leads for the largest international firms. And what we heard is that the disciplines would really be treated much like a learning track in school, and that as the CPA got more experience, the experience would become their primary hiring criteria, not the discipline. And this is no different from what we're seeing today, as 67% of students we surveyed said they're already selecting a focus area before graduation. The next set of questions we got was, how will this affect the accounting education community? So to study this, we formed a joint AICPA NASBA education advisory group. And this had representatives from all over the country, including community colleges, small universities, and large state schools. We also had discussion groups with small schools specifically. We had a discussion group with historically Black colleges and universities. We sent out a survey to accounting educators and got over 150 responses. We talked to both NASBA and AICPA's volunteer education committees, and we talked to the leadership of both AAA and AACSB. And the educators we heard from were largely supportive of CPA evolution, and many saw this as an opportunity to grow their accounting programs. We heard that evolution would increase technology course offerings and accounting programs, which firms have told us is vitally important to meet market demands. We also heard that schools are likely to cover the core through their undergraduate programs and cover the disciplines through certificates, graduate programs, and other avenues. So a lot of schools told us they would see students learning the core in their undergrad and then using their additional 30 hours to cover the discipline. The large schools told us they could see this as a feeder for their Masters of Accountancy programs, and that they could envision launching learning tracks in their master's programs to align with the disciplines. The response from smaller schools was definitely more mixed. We heard concerns about enrollment because students could pursue degrees at larger universities to have more faculty that could cover all 3 disciplines. But we also heard from a lot of smaller schools that they could envision partnering with other schools in their area to increase their course offerings, offering more courses online, or maybe just focusing on 1 or 2 disciplines in their program. But the biggest theme we heard from small schools, and really from all schools, is that they need resources to help them navigate this change. So they asked us for accessible education for their professors to bring them up to speed. They asked for model curricula. They asked for any resources that would help them integrate these topics into their courses. And so we have committed to developing a resource center for academia, which will launch later this fall, that will include a lot of those emerging technology topics. And that will include resources from AICPA and from the big accounting firms that would help faculty start to integrate these topics now. We're also forming some working groups and task forces to help us develop a model curricula, which would demonstrate to accounting programs how they could implement this core plus disciplines model. And then separately, we had heard from firms that a model internship program, if developed collaboratively between firms and educators, would help enhance consistency in those programs and would help support students' pursuit of 150 credit hours. So we are also forming a task force to help us develop a model internship program. And next, we heard a lot of questions about how the CPA exam structure will actually change. So to advise us in this area, we formed an exam advisory group, and that was principally composed of current and former members of the Board of Examiners. And input from that group really helped us gain clarity on how the exam will actually work under evolution. And I'll preface this slide and the next slide with saying that this is all just what we might expect the exam to look like. Changes to the exam are done through a formal practice analysis, which the AICPA's exam team will conduct. So this is all just still what we might expect. But there are lots of things that we expect would stay the same. We expect candidates would still be tested at the 1 to 2 year level. We expect that the exam would still be no more than 16 hours, just like today, and that there would be no new experience requirements to sit for the exam. We expect candidates would still be required to pass 4 exam sections, and those exam sections could be taken in any order, just like today. And there would also still be no separate time limits to pass the core and disciplines. Candidates would have one set amount of time to pass all 4 sections, just like today. But while a lot of the exam would stay the same, obviously there are a lot of changes we would need to make to integrate the disciplines. So we expect that candidates would be required to pass 3 core sections and 1 discipline section, and they would not be permitted to pass additional disciplines. Once they passed 1, their discipline requirement would be complete. Each new section of the exam would cover discrete content in a range of skills. One of the questions we heard a lot was, would higher order skills like professional skepticism and critical thinking still be covered in the core? And the answer is yes, we would still cover a wide range of skills in each section of the exam. And lastly, and very importantly, the discipline the candidate passes does not differentiate the license granted. So everyone is still a CPA. And we got a lot of questions about how this will affect state licensing laws and rules. So to answer that, I'm going to turn it back over to Colleen.
Thanks, Julia. So yeah, that it often is an issue is, oh gosh, are we going to have to change state statutes and rule regulations in states to make this happen, to affect this? And that can be time consuming. Well, we have great news on that front, definitely in New Jersey, great news. There are 7 states that need to make some slight changes to their rules, and 1 state that needs to change its statute. You can see those on the screen here. The change, though, is a fairly non-controversial change, because the change in all cases is that they refer to the exam sections by name in their rules or statute. And so they need to make that change to not refer to specific exam sections. So the changes will be minimal. And I will tell you, Oklahoma is the 1 state that has a statute change. They will tell you in Oklahoma that it's easier to change statute in their state than it is regulation or rule. So in that case, it's actually positive. New York, actually on the prior slide, I had a note that they have already made a temporary change. So, and it should be finalized this fall. So 1 actually is gone further down the road than the others. So how else might it be affected? There really is no change needed for education, even though there are some suggested education changes that I'm going to talk about here in a moment, because based on substantial equivalency, meaning all of the states trying to be as equal as possible, we tagged education requirements to be 150 hours of education and a bachelor's degree with an accounting concentration or equivalent. So all of the states already have that. It's really the detail of the education, the number of accounting hours and business hours and such, where we are actually proposing some changes. But for purposes of switching to evolution, there's none that have to be made. So that's terrific news. So there is, though, right outstanding now, and if you're interested in this area, you might look it up at that website. You could just Google NASBA and exposure draft education, and it'll get you to that same spot. This exposure draft was released in late May, and the exposure period goes through the end of August. And what we've done is looked at the model education rules that state boards look to pick up how they may want to adjust their education rules in their state. It's not like the UCC where you just adopt it. You choose what language you want to use in your state and pick it up in your state rules and regulations. But what we're trying to do here is align the Uniform Accountancy Act model rules with the majority of what many states already do, with a few tweaks. It's a recognition that technology is playing a larger role. So there's a required technology component to education, just like there would be for a required amount of accounting or tax or auditing. There's some technology that is suggested to be required. It's allowing more hours through internships, understanding that that's a valuable way to supplement your education is through the internship process through firms. So that's important too. And lastly, there was a clarification needed about the role that accreditation actually plays when the state boards review transcripts and decide whether someone is qualified to sit for the exam and be licensed or not. So if you're interested in that, it's very much, it's out there. We're seeking input and comments. Would love to have any comments that you have. So what's next? We've talked about where we've been and how we got to the decisions we got to. Let's talk a little bit about where we're going. I mentioned already that AICPA Council approved a resolution to support evolution in May. We've exposed these UAA model rules. The NASBA board a week ago Friday voted to support evolution. So we're now going to be switching into implementation mode. The NASBA board will consider the final UAA education model rule changes after the exposure period to see what kind of input we got. hopefully be in a place to finalize those this fall, which then allows those states that want to take it up and start looking at their education rules and see what they might want to change. It allows them the ability to have finalized UAA model rules to then start doing that. You're also going to see some launching of education resources. Julia talked about some of those. I know some of the technology-focused resources are going to be coming out very shortly, actually, and be available to academia. So then the big question is, and I will not walk all the way through this slide without starting with the end in mind. The whole goal here is to launch the new CPA exam in January of 2024. So some of you may be saying, why wait so long? Let's just get this done. And others of you, if you're in academia or if you're students, may be saying, oh, don't do this so fast, wait a while. But the long pull in the tent here is this new CPA examination. And this is a sea change for this examination. It's still going to be 4 sections, but now it's going to be those 3 core sections plus 1 discipline. But there are 3 disciplines to choose from. So that's really, the examination is being shaken up some, and there'll be 6 sections to the examination. 3 core you have to take, and then 1 of 3 disciplines. So we have to get through that practice analysis, which is going to take some time, with the intent of everything being done by January of 2023. So even the exposure period would be before that. So everybody knows, academia, candidates, everybody would know what the new exam is going to look like a year before it actually changed. So that's very, very important. So you're going to see the exam practice analysis going through this period of time, the blueprint, which is what the exam is actually on the examination, the skills and content tested will be exposed. We'll get feedback back and then finalize it. And Julia talked about the model curriculum and internships programs and all of that work happening on the education side. That will happen over the next year or 2 also. So some good information coming. And that, I think we're excited. January 2024, there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done between now and then. There will be a lot of opportunities for people to provide input and feedback. We have a lot of task forces and committees that are being formed to help us through. And so if that's something you're interested in, make sure and let your state society know and have them share that with us. So we're in the formative stage now of starting implementation, and we're excited about the future of the profession, the future of the licensure of the profession, and excited just for all of us. So I think at this time, that ends our formal presentation. I know we've allowed some time for questions. I'll turn it back over to Ralph to see if there's any questions or that we would need to address.
Okay. Well, thanks, Colleen and Julia. Really appreciate it. A couple of questions. One being, what did you hear any concerns expressed by accounting majors about the CPA evolution and the move in that direction? I know you reached out to state boards of accountancies and whatnot, but what about those individuals that are already in the pipeline and majoring in accounting? Did you have get any reaction from those students?
Yeah, so those would be the student survey results I mentioned, and
Okay.
Those results were overall really positive. So we heard from 47% of them saying this would increase their interest in the CPA, 33% saying already very interested, this won't make them any less interested. And we did have those 16% that I mentioned that said they would be less interested. But when we asked them about it, it turned out they just didn't really understand what the model is. And so that we just need to do some further education with accounting students.
I do think too that there was some, what we are trying to lead with now as we communicate to those in the pipeline, those that they're students, they are starting to take the examination or thinking they're going to be starting it here shortly, is that January 2024 date is the key date. I watch social media, and when we did press releases last week saying, yes, we're now moving forward with this, it's important to lead with the significant change is January of 24 to the new exam, and there will be a transition plan from the old exam to the new one. So if somebody's in the pipeline, we're going to have to figure out if they, what sections they've taken and what they may need to take in the new exam. Absolutely, everybody that I'm seeing now in social media saying, I'm going to get this done. This is incentive to finish up before it switches over, so I don't have to worry about the change, right? And on the education front, it's just knowing the education rules in the state in which you're applying and seeing how they might change. I don't think you're going to see significant changes. So if I were a student, I think I would feel good about the rules in my state and just making sure that I'm watching these.
Okay. One other question, I've always had this concern from the academic standpoint, is the fact that academia takes usually a long time to invoke change. So if with the CPA Evolution initiative, are you concerned that, some institutions may be left behind, or how do you feel about that? And particularly, I would put a focus on the smaller institutions and the HBCUs. Usually your larger institutions, have a little more ease to adapt and change quickly. So what do you see as being the impact on academia in terms of if this moves forward, not if, that it is moving forward, will they be able to come up to speed and have their students properly prepared to take the new exam?
So that's all those accounting educator resources I mentioned before, Ralph. The reason we picked all those things to develop was based directly off the feedback we got from schools, and particularly from the smaller schools and HBCUs that we know really need the support. And so that's why we're developing a model curricula. So we are hoping to have a high-level model curriculum that would show how to implement this core plus disciplines model. And then we're also going to do some deeper dives into the disciplines in the next few years before the exam launches to show even more in depth how these things could be integrated into accounting programs. We do know education can take a long time to change. So that's why we're launching that resource hub this fall with some of those technology topics that we already know need to be, brought up to speed in the accounting education world.
Yeah, well, I think we're finding that a lot of universities are already realizing that they need to add more technology, data analytics, and such into their programs. And so there's already a lot of universities that are doing that. I think we're going to have a survey coming out here before too long also to find out where the gaps are for sure, to find out what universities have and don't have in the way of coursework and materials and stuff related to some of the key areas in technology and data. And we'll use that to help inform what kind of resources need to be provided most quickly. Lots of focus groups, specific focus groups for small universities, HBCUs. And I talked about opportunities to volunteer on these committees and task forces that are going to be formed very shortly to look at disciplines, to look at the core. And we're making sure that there's representation from all sizes of universities, different kinds of professors, adjunct professors, full professors, heads of accounting programs. So we get all the perspectives.
Okay. Sticking on the academic side, do you see the fact of CPA Evolution being an opportunity to add some modeling, if you will, for the 150-hour requirement? Because currently there's not a model out there. Individuals can take whatever in terms of the 30 additional hours that are needed to become a licensed CPA. You see that this may be an opportunity for the profession, for NASBA, whomever, to set up a curriculum for those additional 30 hours that are required for individuals to become licensed?
I think that there's not, we're going to stick with no specificity to the overall 150. Now, I will say absolutely some universities, when they saw this model, they said, this is great. This allows us to focus our master's program on these disciplines and their natural paths forward to get the basic, the core in the bachelor's degree, and then build on that with master's programs in these disciplines. So it's definitely an opportunity, and some universities are seizing that and saying, this is great. This is a great way to market our program and our university. But it does allow, not everybody, goes straight through and gets a bachelor's and master's at one university, right? They may start at a smaller university, may start in community college, and may need the flexibility of those 30 hours being able, they may have started not as an accounting major, right? Maybe they start as an engineering major, or they start in totally a different area. Then they need the flexibility of those 30 hours to really focus their accounting and business hours at the end of their education career, or maybe they've gone back to school. So we love the flexibility that the 150-hour requirement provides. It does require this, that you're deep in accounting and auditing, but it provides some flexibility too. So I think there's kind of something in it for everybody. Larger universities that want to have track programs, smaller universities that maybe don't want to. They may, Julia mentioned teaming up, that some of the smaller universities may partner up with master's programs in other universities, and that's great. That's an opportunity. We've seen it happen already, and we think we might see more of that too.
Okay. We got a question in about the impact on CPAs who have been recently licensed. Is there a concern that CPAs who have recently been licensed be disadvantaged as a result of the expansion on CPA evolution, if you will?
I would say no. Again, we're stressing heavily CPA equals CPA. So, but that is where the recent graduates are probably, depending on the university they went to, through their education, they probably picked up some of the technology, but they're also, I would anticipate, picking up a lot of it in their experience, in their early years in their firms. They're learning a lot of that, boots on the ground, through their experience. But when all's said and done, whether somebody gets a CPA after January of 24, or they get it now, or they got it 10 years ago, they're a CPA. And we know that your experience, your work experience becomes so much more important the further you get away from just getting out of school. And that's what people look to. They look to your experience as a CPA as you move forward in your career.
Okay. We had a question regarding the recognition of international certifications such as FCA, ICAEW, CPA Canada, or CPA Hong Kong. How is this going to impact those certifications or designations?
Well, CPA Evolution is focused only on the CPA license, which is the US license, so it would not affect the international credential.
I think in the long, it definitely doesn't impact, but we also know that there's a lot of interplay between globally within the profession. There are, some of you may not know, there's an examination called the IQEX, the International Qualification Examination, that if somebody is a CPA, a Canadian CPA, they can take a one-section examination now, and as long as they meet the other requirements, become a US CPA. Same thing, a US CPA could become a Canadian CPA by taking kind of a gap examination per se. So we will have to continue to look at the international examination to ensure that it's measuring the right gap. But we have mutual recognition agreements with some of the international bodies, with Australia, with Canada, with Hong Kong, with South Africa very recently. And I know we are in discussions with ICAW about a possible mutual recognition agreement there too. So yeah, there's interplay, but that it doesn't impact somebody, as Julia said, having that other international designation, but the routes to become a U.S. CPA or for a U.S. CPA to go other places is still in place.
Well, I think those are all the questions that I've seen in the chat. So, Colleen and Julia, thank you so very much for being with us today and explaining all of this so clearly. I'm sure there'll be maybe some subsequent questions that, if you all don't mind, we'll shoot to you for your consideration and whatnot. And I want to thank our audience today for being with us to learn more about the CPA Evolution Initiative. And if you want to get additional information, please feel free to visit evolutionofcpa.org or email feedback@evolutionofcpa.org. Again, thank you both for taking the time to be with us. I'm sure there'll be some additional questions coming down the pike, and we look forward to what CPA Evolution has to bring to all of us.